Welcome to Human Inclusion Podcast by Enolla Consultancy. Today we are delighted to be joined by Logan Partridge, who is an inclusion and wellbeing champion and the latest addition to Enolla. Logan decided to go travelling in South and Central America in 2022-23 and began a podcast, Queer World Podcast, speaking to individuals he met along the way from Brazil to Mexico. Queer World Podcast is available on Spotify and Amazon Audible. Please give them a follow on Insta at Queer World Podcast. Enjoy the interview.
Human Inclusion Podcast by Enolla Consulting.
Hello, Logan.
Hi, Chantal.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, privilege. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Me too.
Good.
I don't know what's about to happen, but let's go.
Well, I think let's just ease you in gently, right? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yes. So, Queer World Podcast, incredible. You've been talking to different people about their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So let's turn the spotlight on you.
Okay.
What is your inclusion story and why is inclusion important to you?
Okay. So I had to think about this question quite a bit, but also, I think anybody who's felt like they don't belong at some stage in their life, inclusion comes quite important to them.
Yeah.
And obviously, growing up as a gay person, I was, excluded quite a lot because I was seen to be different and to like things that boys shouldn't like. And so from quite a young age, felt like quite shut out from the world. And that probably remained until my late teens.
Wow.
So, I mean, I had a very loving and supportive home.
Yeah.
But, you don't spend a huge amount of time in that home. Your parents can't, protect you all the time. So, and I think that led me actually to, I think, be quite a compassionate person because throughout life, I always made friends with other people who I've also felt experienced similar thing. Maybe it's that kind of safety in numbers sort of thing. So I think that experience actually taught me a lot of compassion. And then I've also been unfortunate enough to have worked in toxic environments.
Yeah.
Where I've felt kind of ostracized or not supported, slandered or gaslit, So unfortunately, I've experienced that, and that's made it feel all the more important to me to role model inclusive behaviour and to kind of help other people see what that looks like. I worked with Enolla years ago in my previous job, and I've seen that the work that Enolla could do with the people that they trained at the business I worked for, and how successful that had been, how people's language had changed, how people's attitudes had changed in group settings, and also as managers. So that really inspired me. And I also worked on the inclusion network at that business, and that I kind of found myself getting more energy from that than my actual job. My actual job, I could do it and I could do a good job with it, but it wasn't taking too much of my mental capacity. So I was putting everything I could into the inclusion side, and I really got a buzz from that because I felt like it was making a difference. So I guess that would be most of my inclusion story from what I can remember. But yeah, it's I think it should be central to any workplace, and kind of how you carry yourself as a person as well. And also it affects so many different parts of the working environment. When I worked as a facilities professional, my main thing was how to make a space inclusive.
Yeah.
If you've got neurodiverse people, there are different needs that each person might have whether that's to do with sound or the physicality of the space, and also people with mobility differences. There's a building and a space can include everyone, and so I when I worked in facilities, like the idea of the design approach including everyone from the beginning. So much is retrofitted or just can't be changed, and I thought that was disappointing. So if I were still in that area, that's something that I would try and champion.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting what you were talking about in terms of where it comes from, in terms of about your identity and the point that just being who you are can be cause for you to be excluded, which is just, when you say it like that, it sounds really strange. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there is this thing, I think, because obviously we know each other.
Yeah.
Where I feel like an outsider for different reasons, but then because of that, there's that connection that's there. So you kind of get that, I don't know, there's that understanding, that knowingness that kind of comes with that.
Yeah.
And then you create your own kind of found family, or, you know what I mean, from that.
Yeah. You kind of do try and find, spot the people that you can also feel safe with, even if it might be that you don't necessarily think you would have things in common, but if your commonality is that you don't belong, you can kind of belong with each other, which probably sounds quite sad, but we take comfort, I think, wherever we can. And I feel like maybe that's probably changed in a younger generation now, because you have the internet.
Yeah.
And whilst it poses a huge amount of problems, it's also it's a safe haven for people who don't feel like they belong as well, because they can find someone exactly like them on that. And when you are completely isolated, and perhaps you don't live in a big city where you can meet any kind of person, and when you're younger, it's harder to meet people like you anyways, because that depends on what your parents allow you to do and what access they have to get you into other spaces as well. So I feel hopeful that that it's easier now. Yeah. Possibly. But obviously there's still going to be that experience of not belonging for everyone, because the world is so diverse and we're all taught so many different things.
Is that why let me ask you the question rather than deciding that's the answer. So what made you want to kind of ask these stories for Queer World Podcast? What was it? Why did you feel the need to? I know that you said that it was important for you to, I think in part, did you say about role modelling and also for other people to not feel that sense of exclusion? Does that fall into this, in terms of the Queer World Podcast? Did it link into that somehow? Like, what was the... I'm slightly leading. I don't want to, but I'm thinking, where's the connection between your inclusion journey and then the desire to create Queer World Podcast and how that came about? And it could be there's no wrong answer, obviously. It could be whatever.
I mean, I don't know. I'm wondering if maybe you're getting at something that I've not joined together in my own head yet as well, as to why I really wanted to make this story. I mean, there's a few simple points that when traveling, I didn't want to just have the kind of basic tourist experience of seeing cool things and taking photos and just meeting other tourists. I really wanted to connect with people that were living where I was traveling. And also I wanted to meet people that were like me in those places. So there was that. And I wanted to test myself creatively, and this was a new opportunity to do that. I've always been quite scared to try new things in case I'll be rubbish.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to not do that so much now I'm older. I want to just say, try it. It doesn't need to be good. Just enjoy the process. That's
really cool. That it's gone the other way. As you're getting older, you're getting bolder.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I like that. I've just I feel like I've missed out on a lot of things because I've always just said I probably won't be any good, so why try? So there was that as well. And also I've listened to a lot of podcasts since I probably got into podcasts like 7 years ago.
Right.
And I've listened to some amazing ones over the years, and amazing stories, but a lot of the people that we listen to, not that they don't have an incredible story to tell, but a lot of people like are big celebrities or people who have had really incredible educations. So whilst all these people have something to say, I feel like there's just as much wisdom that we can learn from people who haven't had those opportunities or that access. And there's wisdom in the everyday, and there's like that's my mantra for the podcast that I say at the beginning of every episode is small revolutions every day.
I love that.
Which I kind of try and live by, and like just the way that you act can be a revolutionary act.
That's so good. Could put you on the spot a little bit. What was your revolutionary act today? Your small revolutionary act today?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I've had time to do that yet, Shan.
Is it on your list for afterwards?
It's the way the way you hold yourself in a space and allow other people to be in a space as well. If allowing people to be fully themselves, under the understanding, the kind of unsaid understanding and unwritten rule that you can also be yourself in that space, I think is a really revolutionary thing to do.
I agree with you. That's great.
I've always had a big thing around like arbitrary rules, dress codes. You have to act like this in this sort of space. It's always really got my back up because it's not inclusive.
Yeah.
So just allowing someone to come exactly as they are and not judging that and making them feel comfortable and still and understood.
Yeah.
Is revolutionary. Lots of people don't do that.
I even think like just giving someone eye contact is like a revolutionary.
It's like where we live as well. Cool.
Yeah. The phones, like something's always going off. Like, oh yeah, a minute. Yeah, I'm here. It's like, but you're not actually here. Yeah. I love that.
So it's so true. And saying people's names.
Yeah.
I feel like is a really big thing. I try and say people's names a lot. My friends laugh at me sometimes. Like when we meet someone new, they'll be like, "Why have you said that name 8 times?" I want them to know that I know them. I see them. So just small things can be revolutionary because that's you. And if you're always trying to act in a way that you think is going to impact others positively, and that just becomes part of your everyday, then you might not even notice that you're doing something that's really changed someone else's day. And that everybody ultimately wants to pay it forward when they get that feeling. So it has a butterfly effect, I think.
That's lovely. I really like that. I'm going to take that away. A small revolutionary act. Yeah.
Cool.
That you can do. I like that. Thinking about the people that you spoke to, I spoke to a few and I've listened to it. It's actually great, the podcast.
Thank you.
And you're brilliant and it is wonderful. So I can't wait for people to, check it out. Which of the conversations do you think had the biggest kind of, I know they were all great, right? So you can't have a favourite. It's not that, but
I was thinking, it's a bit of a cop-out, but like everyone was great.
Yeah.
I can try.
You can try, okay. Which one kind of had the most kind of the longest maybe lasting impact on you where you kind of like that they just never really left, they never leave you, but like the one that was like, whoa, okay. Really,
So there's one group that I still think about a lot because of the feeling of optimism and the enthusiasm, and was really inspiring. They were so young. I met a group of people in Ecuador that had a group called Status Queer.
Okay.
And it was founded by 2 people who have a background working for the government and working in law. And they were using their knowledge to create a community of young activists, young LGBTQ plus activists, to figure out what it is that is lacking in queer life in Ecuador for LGBTQ plus people, and using their knowledge of the legal system and the governmental systems to create reform and recommendations that could be passed to local and national governments. And it really, the feeling in the room of how excited people were to be a part of politics was very refreshing. I think we're all pretty like fatigued at the moment. So it was really nice to, especially young people, to see how up for it they were, how many ideas they had, and how they were using what they've got to help people who might sometimes think, I don't know how to get my ideas to my representative or if I'll ever be listened to. You know, they were using the knowledge they had of the systems that they lived in to give people who didn't know how any of it worked the opportunity to have their voices heard, which I thought was really amazing. So I think about that a lot. I really think that group will probably have a massive impact where they are, and I hope they will.
It is amazing because, like you say, we're quite fatigued by politics here, and that just feels like pure politics, like what it's supposed to be for, and how powerful it can be and how it can affect change in such a positive way, just done with heart and mind and togetherness, and how can we make things better for the community. You know, I think that's just, it's so inspiring, isn't it? Just think, oh gosh,
I feel like,
you know,
there's so much performance in politics in the UK at the moment, at least, and probably the US as well, that it's kind of like we're not even talking about the actual issues that we have at hand. It's just, you know, like punditry and sound bites and tweets, and it's just nothing ever actually changes. So it was a real breath of fresh air to see that. And I wish we could have actually have more of that in real politics.
I know.
So that was cool. And also I really enjoyed meeting a queer tango group in Uruguay. One story by a beautiful woman, Puma Camille, that I met in Brazil. She's a capoeira dancer, professionally trained, which is a Brazilian martial arts dance style. And she's combined that with voguing that she discovered when she was a teenager. And the styles really blend together really well. So it's amazing to watch. But it was also just an amazing story to hear about. Voguing kind of allowed her to really get in touch with her gender identity and her trans identity, and was a celebration of everything that she had kind of felt shut out from in the capoeira community, because even though capoeira began as a revolutionary act for Afro-Brazilian people who were freeing themselves from slavery and persecution, it had got kind of stuck in what she felt was quite misogynistic structure. So her body became not acceptable in that space. But voguing accepted her, and so she combined the two to kind of perform this revolutionary act. Which it's beautiful to watch, and I love it when somebody has the kind of the bravery and the passion for something to say, I can still make it mean something to me. And you know, art is objective. Actually, you put whatever you want it to mean onto it. So if you strip out all of those old things away about it's supposed to be like this, it's supposed to be like that, and just see it for what it is, whether it's movement or whatever the art form is, it can be anything, and it can be liberating for everybody.
I mean, art is kind of like, it's alchemy, right, in artistry, and to even feel like art would have borders or boundaries or structure or rules or would just feel very strange. I mean, even thinking about something that has a structure with, writing.
Yeah.
You still break it, you still play with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of, there's so much imagination that you have to impose on it for it to hold anyway, to be worthwhile. But yeah, I was very taken with her, and again, it just reminded me of that, what we were talking about right at the beginning about just being treated a certain way just for simply existing and being who you are.
Yeah.
But her ability to reclaim some of that and have some agency around her body and the movement and the two forms of, the capoeira, the voguing, and bringing all those things, fusing those things together. Again, it's just so inspiring, isn't it?
Yeah, really inspiring. And
yeah.
And it also makes perfect sense if you really think about it. Both of them were created as forms of self-preservation for oppressed Black people.
Yeah.
In different contexts, but they were forms that they were creating safe spaces, and and creating something where people could feel powerful in a time when they weren't allowed to feel safe or powerful.
Yeah.
And so combining the two in that sense also makes perfect sense. And so I love that she had the courage to do that and is now sharing that with other people in her community and bringing those two communities together to experience that as well. So yeah, I want to see more of that always. I think
I love that. I was having a sip of water. I love
you
that.
can do that.
It is strange because, as a Black person, you have the way you can be seen, dominant or powerful or threatening, and actually it's kind of like, well, yeah, everyone can be those things, but if you think about like the structure that you live in, it's not set up for you in that way. So actually being able to find those spaces in the voguing, and I mean, I know everyone's going to go, oh, please stop talking about that film. But, Paris is Burning was one of those films that I remember watching years ago and just, oh my gosh, just one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. But just that heart and that grit, and this is our space, and even though we can be seen as this is who we are.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
think
what
it's amazing. They just they were told you can't be part of this world, so they just recreated a world where they could be anything they wanted and no one could say anything about it. And that is amazing. But it's also like, why can't the world just be like that? Why can't we all be anyone? So taking their energy and their grit and their soul and bringing that into the real world is only going to be like beneficial for everybody.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I love hearing these stories. I think I've got a lot of time for kind of underdog stories, and like I was saying before, I think that you can learn so much from so many people. Everybody's got some kind of story or wisdom that you can learn from. So I just wanted to kind of find those stories wherever I went.
That's great. Were there any commonalities? Yeah, I said that okay. In the end.
Yeah, commonalities.
Were there?
I'm glad you said it, not me. I think there's a sense of real eagerness to connect in all of those spaces. So I met a queer tango group in Uruguay, and since meeting them and releasing their podcast episode, the queer tango community from literally all over the world has listened to that episode. They've started following the podcast.
What?
That even though it's global, it seems really tight-knit and really supportive of each other, and there's a massive like championing of each other, which I love. And I do think I saw that in a lot of the spaces that I was invited into, which I really love. So I definitely think that's a commonality that I think is important, that like sticking together and supporting each other and getting the message out there for each other, that I really liked. Yeah, the tango community is kind of amazing. Like, apparently any city you go to around the world, you can find a queer tango community or class.
Can you?
Yeah, apparently there are 2 in London, so I really need to find at least one of them and get down there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's everywhere. One of the people that I interviewed, he's from Austria, but he was doing a PhD on queer tango specifically in Uruguay, because Montevideo in Uruguay and Buenos Aires are kind of seen as like the equal homes of tango. But he's also practicing tango a couple times a week every day in Austria when he's there, and goes to festivals all over the world. So it's really cool how that's flourished and become so connected.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to ask the final question. Can't believe it's come to the end already.
Yeah, it's flown by.
It has. And I ask it with slight hesitation, actually, because sometimes I feel like, is it fair to ask this question? Because the work is something that I should do, or, you know, other people should do. But I'm going to ask it anyway. Hope you can forgive me for it.
It's cool.
How can we be better allies to the LGBTQIA+ community?
Yeah, I tried to think about this question a lot and tried to think of things that maybe haven't been talked about a lot in other spaces, on other podcasts or anything like that, or in other, LGBT History Months or Pride Month and stuff.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say is obviously to kind of add to what you were saying, people should do their own work.
Yeah.
When it comes to businesses, if you want to be a good ally, then I think you should stop relying on the marginalised people in your business to give their emotional labour to create ideas to build an inclusive environment for free.
Yeah.
There are consultants that you can pay.
Yeah.
So you should do that, and you can do your own research before you have to come to people within your company and ask them for their ideas and their experience, because that takes a lot of on that person. And quite often businesses expect you to do it in your free time, not outside of your job role. So
it's true, because things that get surfaced, sometimes, I don't know if it's more than less, can be quite triggering, and so, like you say, it's that emotional labour of, well, I've had to dig into this space, I'm at work, and now I've got to think about myself with this other kind of hat on, and now I've got to produce some work based on maybe a traumatic experience that I can connect to, or something that's happened in the news that's made me feel a bit uncomfortable about coming into work today, and now that's part of a proposal and a plan. It's kind of like, where am I as a human in this situation?
And it's fine for people to want to be a part of that work, but I think if it is work, then it should be treated as so. And I think too often at the moment, because there's not enough clarity, I think a lot of the time, or there's not enough belief in the return on investment from heads of companies sometimes. I think it's harder to persuade them to actually just make the investment by giving the people the time during their work or paying for the consultancy. It is getting better all the time. That's why businesses like ours exist.
Yeah,
because
it is getting better.
people have belief in it, but sometimes there is a bit of a push. So I do think that if it is something that a business genuinely believes in, then they should channel the investment into consultancy and do their own work before they come to the people within their company. You can get feedback from people on how they think it's going initially, I think, for sure, to make sure you're going in the right direction. But I think we lean too much on the individuals in the business sometimes, and it can be taxing in more ways than one. So I think you can be a good ally by doing your work first. And I would also say, like, just generally speaking, as an ally, I feel like we live in this strange time where people are scared not to have an opinion on things anymore. I feel like once upon a time, if you didn't know something about something, you'd say, "Oh, I don't know about that. I don't really know what to think." But in this like social media age where you see constant opinions flying everywhere, it's almost like people are scared to not have one, so they'll pick from whatever they're hearing out in the wider world.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really wise thing. It takes a lot more wisdom to be unbiased and open before you actually have that experience with a person yourself, and so you can make your mind up about something. So like just trying to keep your mind clean in a way, before making a decision on something that's actually based on your own personal experience, I think is a good form of allyship in a kind of less tangible way. And I would also say that like for LGBTQ plus people as well, it's important for us to be allies to each other and to all other marginalised people. We have to kind of all be united. And so I think that is a really important thing to remember. We can't kind of be having any infighting or not all supporting each other. So that would be another thing that I would say is a good form of allyship.
That's lovely. Thank you. It's a lovely way to end. And yeah, I think it's just highlighting more about the conversation, the importance of conversations, the ones that you're having, you know, in Queer World podcast, the ones that we're having today, just the ones that you can have in your day to day, and just that lovely point of just not feeling like you have to have all the answers. And we tend to not have the answers, and everyone's experience is going to be different. So just having conversations and talks with people who maybe you don't really understand, or whose point of view is very different from your own, you think, but then actually when you just sit and have a coffee or whatever it is, then you realise, oh, actually, we're not as far away from each other as
I thought.
Yeah.
And what you said there about, you know, having all the answers is, you know, I don't think we have to have all the answers and we don't have to know everything. And when it comes to being a good ally, I think a lot of the time we're not expecting allies to know all the answers and know exactly how you can support or help us. A lot of the time we're actually asking for access to a space that we couldn't get into on our own.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding what your privilege is and how you can use that to support any other community. You know, you may have more privilege in one place than I do, and I may have more privilege than you in another space.
Yeah.
And the idea is knowing how we can use that in that space to champion the other person and raise them up.
Yeah. Here's to raising people up. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks,
this is great.
Anne.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was really nice to come in. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great to have you. And we're going to send everyone to your Instagram at Queer World Podcast. Also the podcast itself, which is on Spotify. and Amazon Audible.
Yes, it's on those. It might be in other places as well, but I don't think I've found it.
Okay.
But I am learning. So you can review it too if you do listen, because I'd love some constructive feedback. The only one doing it at the moment is my dad. I'm over it. He doesn't know anything, so.
Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you.